So what is this thing about freedom boards? Well, I've alluded to it, but let me just sort of start from the beginning. And that is that there's a very well-known phrase that I think is wrong. An old saying that says that truth is power. I got that wrong. The saying is that knowledge is power. We've all heard that. Probably most of us have said it at one time or another, including myself. Knowledge is power. It's really not quite true. Knowledge is not power if we don't do anything with that knowledge. You can be the most informed person in the world, and you can still be enslaved because you didn't do anything wise with that knowledge to prevent your enslavement. I'm sure that in every country where tyrants have taken over, they have enslaved and put into prison, concentration camps, many people who were very well informed and had a great deal of knowledge. So if you wind up in a concentration camp someplace, it doesn't make any difference how many books you have back home in your library. So that is pretty clear. The issue is, how can we convert knowledge into power? I think the first step is to understand what power really is. Power is the ability to influence the actions of others. That's really what it is. And our enemies have tremendous power to influence the actions of others because they have gravitated into positions of government and into media and all of the other extremely effective power centers of society. And unless we do the same, ladies and gentlemen, it's not going to make any difference what we know, or how enthusiastic we are, or how determined we are to get into a revolution. It's what kind of a revolution is it that we really can succeed in. I'd like to address that issue of the revolution right at this moment because it's kind of a segue into the kind that I think that we need to undertake. When people speak of a revolution today, they're thinking generally in terms of two types. One is sort of a political revolution or a change in thinking, a revolutionary change in thought about the nature of government and who we want to represent us. And that's where the phrase the Ron Paul revolution comes in. And I think that's a very good use of the word revolution. But others are thinking it's time to turn to the more physical type of revolution. It's time to get your guns out. It's time to get organized. It's time to confront the enemy with physical force. And I caution anybody thinking along those lines, not because I think it's a bad philosophical idea, but I don't think they've thought through the chances of being successful with that. We tend to say, well, we had an American Revolution. In the beginning, that's how America started. We had a bunch of people that just got together. They were fed up with tyranny. They didn't like being ruled from overseas by King George, and they fought a revolution. And that's not anywhere close to a proper analysis of what happened. The colonists did not fight the revolution one-on-one. They fought them as groups, as power centers. You see, the colonies were already structured into states. We had organizations. There were power centers, and the men who drafted the Declaration of Independence were not just individuals. They represented the power centers of their colonies. They came from governments. There were courts. There were military, militia. There was a monetary system. There was a judicial system. They had real functioning governments. Had they not had that, there would have been no chance in the world of the colonies defeating the British, because they could never have become organized. They wouldn't have had the funding, they wouldn't have had the ammunition, they wouldn't have had the training, they wouldn't have had leaders, for one thing. So, in order for a revolution of that kind to take place, you must have power centers functioning. Those power centers could successfully lead a revolution. We don't have that. We just don't have that, and that's the reason that Freedom Pulse is so focused on getting control of or creating new power centers of society. Because until we have coordination and cooperation and the force and effect of many people working together, there's no chance of any kind of a revolution taking place, either the ideological one or the physical one. Now, I'm not advocating the physical revolution because for the reason I just mentioned, and beyond that, you must understand that the collectivists who are running the governments of the world, particularly ours, now have access to some weapons that just are mind-boggling. I don't know whether you're following it or not, but they have things such as the little radar device they call the move-along. And they could just park a van out there and turn that and everybody in this room would feel like they were on fire. And you would run and scream. And they have this kind of thing. And of course they have powerful weapons of destruction as well. Chemical weapons, biological weapons. They have all of these young men who think they're serving their country who would now be willing to go out and pull the trigger if necessary on their fellow Americans if they were told that those fellow Americans were terrorists or something worse. So I'd like to say that it was just a simple matter of going and getting your guns and meeting the breach at the Concord Bridge. But it's not. See, in those days, the enemy wore a uniform. It was a different color than ours, and we could recognize him. And he was the enemy from over there. Today, the enemy is within. And we don't know the enemy until it's too late. So I say that the only chance of success is for us to get into the power centers of society. And once we're there, we have control, then this issue of armed revolution disappears. We don't even need that anymore. We're back to where we should have been all along. We're in control of our own system. The problem with that is that it's not going to happen right away. People are impatient. They say, oh, I want it to happen by the next election. We don't have many months left. Let's go. Well, I have the bad news to tell you that it's not going to happen by the next election. It's taken our enemies 100 years for them to implement this plan of capturing control of the power centers of society. We have to reverse that process, and we can't do it in 7 months. Even if we got Ron Paul into the White House, even if we did, what's he going to do? He's surrounded by collectivists who would completely negate everything and anything he tried to do. You need individualists, you need freedom-loving people everywhere in a society to make it work. Not just one place in the White House. First of all, as a constitutionalist, Ron Paul would have to say, I don't have the authority to do all of the things that I would like to do. He would deny himself doing most of the things that we would want to do, and he would be corrected. So anyway, my point is that the negative side and the pessimistic side is that it can't be done by next November. But the positive side is it can be done if we have the long view of history, and if we're willing to think about our children and our grandchildren other than ourselves, and think it's important to start putting in motion strategies and structures today that are going to grow and survive no matter what's going to happen to our society, and will come out the other side in the sunlight. That's what I'm looking forward to. And you know, it's not such a bad thought. I used to be very impatient. I wanted to get things done in my lifetime, but I don't think it's all going to be done in my lifetime. Probably not the lifetime of many of you in this room. But that isn't as bad as it might seem if you can look forward to the fact that we are building a foundation now that will make a difference in the future. Our founding fathers looked forward into the future, and I think it's our turn to do it now.